Thank you for joining us. It's a small but mighty crowd. We should have a really good discussion here. My name is Nader Qaimari. I'm the Chief Product Officer at ISACA, which is a nonprofit based out of Chicago, and basically a global nonprofit that does certifications, credentials, and training in the IT space. And I'm joined by a very wonderful panel here representing both academia and workforce from many different places. So I'm actually going to start off by having you introduce yourselves and maybe talk a little bit about what brought you here. So why are you on this panel talking about this topic? So maybe we start with Jorge first.
Hi, my name is Jorge Valentine. I'm STEM education and workforce development manager for the Puerto Rico Science Trust. And we are basically focusing our work in two areas. One of them is STEM education, working from K to 16 all throughout and making the transition into the workforce after university with the workforce development effort that we're conducting in Puerto Rico as part of the mission to develop the island as a socioeconomic innovation hub for the Caribbean. So basically what brings me here is a great partnership that we have begun with ISACA, where we are going to use most of the content in certifications for IT and making them accessible to under and unemployed individuals on the island.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jorge. Veronica?
Hello, everyone. My name is Veronica Aguilar. I'm Executive Director of Technology Strategy for City Colleges of Chicago, which is a 7-college system serving over 70,000 people. And in that work, what we're doing is developing more rigorous technology programs. And we also have a partnership with ISACA currently that we've piloted a year ago, and we're going into the second iteration of that program, also leveraging their IT certifications and cybersecurity. And so a lot of our thought process is, how do we leverage what's happening in the economy now, what's happening post-pandemic, and how we're educating modern learners and partnering with really great partners like ISACA to develop students in a way that's relevant, efficient, cost-effective. And our demographic is primarily first-generation students of color. Majority of them are women, and so we're hitting a really underserved demographic in tech. But as an institution, we're also going through our own learning curve of educating in a space that we haven't been really totally involved with cybersecurity. So we're really relying and leaning on our good friends over at ISACA to build out that partnership, which is why we're here today.
Thank you, Veronica. Dr. Memon?
Hi. Good morning. It's not afternoon yet. So good morning, everyone. My name is Nasir Memon. I'm a professor in the computer science department at New York and a vice dean at New York University's Tandon School of Engineering. And what one of the things I do is I start and run our online and professional education programs. So at the engineering school. And about 3 or 4 years back, we kind of started some new programs with the belief that the right programs are the best way to create programs in universities is to actually partner very actively with industry and organizations such as ISACA to give students like that the kind of best of both worlds, a combination of these two things, because we feel that that's the right way to do things. And what brings us here is that wonderful partnership we've started with ISACA that wanted to share with you the benefits that the students get out of it and why it makes it a better program.
Excellent. Thank you. So, really there's one common problem we're all trying to solve, which is to get people employed, get people jobs. One of the things, if we talk about cybersecurity specifically, so there are about 500,000, it's estimated, 500,000 open positions in cybersecurity today just in North America. If you look at the number globally, it's actually estimated to be over 3 million. And that's just what's posted. So when we did a survey actually of companies and talked to the head of technology at a number of different companies, 61% of them felt that they were understaffed. Even with these openings posted, they still feel like there are other positions that need to be filled. And that's just cybersecurity. So how do we solve this problem? Because it seems like a lot of people who are graduating from college or from degree programs, they're just not interested in this field, or they don't have the skills for this field. So what can we do to kind of bridge that gap between what's happening in terms of what companies need and then what's being produced in academia? I guess we can start with you, Dr. Mehmann, and then...
Yeah, I can go on about this for a long time. I'll try to keep it short, right? So I think the first thing we need is affordability. As has been mentioned in this conference many times, higher ed is crazily expensive, right? And so you need affordability. If you want to scale the programs, you've got to make them affordable. And also you need to make them open, right? Where we're not sort of priding ourselves on exclusivity, right? When NYU says that, okay, we take only 10% of the students that apply, well, that's not going to solve this problem, right? So we need to be more open and scale the kind of education we give to a larger populations. And the third thing is that we should, and I said that before, very actively participate and engage with industry in creating our programs, right? And have deep partnerships with them. Because after all, that is where they're headed. Academia was kind of mired in this model that our students first do a BS and then MS and a PhD and then become professors, right? How many professors do we need? Actually, most of them end up going to the workforce, and academia should be more actively thinking about are we preparing them well for the workforce? And in order to do that, they need to partner with industry. They can't do it alone. I've been a professor all my life, never had a real job, I tell people, and I wouldn't know. I'm considered to be a cybersecurity expert. I started the cybersecurity program 20 years ago. But if you put me in a company and say, protect that company, I wouldn't know how to do it, right? Because I know one kind of knowledge, which is deep, but I don't know another kind of knowledge, and you need both of it, kind of a thing.
Excellent. Veronica?
Yeah, I think definitely to speak on that, a lot of what we're learning at city colleges is that there's a huge shift in modern education, and we're seeing a lot of experimentation happen at the community college level because we're open access, we're hitting a demographic that wants to get into the workforce that's going to help create upward economic mobility, and it's going to have to be in technology, in hardcore technology jobs. And so a lot of what we're learning is that affordability, definitely key, and that's something that we know a lot about. Access is something we know a lot about. But giving students something that is relevant in a timely fashion is super key to their success, and doing that in partnership with the workforce and with partners like ISACA is key to how you get there. So getting students in the door, we can do that. We've been doing that for years. Getting them exposed to, here's an industry that you had no idea you can be in, and here are some roles that could be interesting to you, and start developing these interests is a key way to start solving those problems, because a lot of it is just lack of exposure. If we're working with first-generation students, they've never had someone in their families or friends or neighbors who have been in cybersecurity, who have been in these jobs, until they get into a more specific program with us that they can afford, that is open to them, that isn't so selective, but that is rigorous, competitive, and nationally recognized. That's what's super key. And the other piece is building that network for students, right? Because if I go into a program, I have the certification, I leverage ISACA's membership capacity, now I know people in the industry. Now if I need a job, I can send them an email. I'm like, hey, I'm that kid from that class that I took. I need a job, right? And this is something that we really believe in. And a lot of the people that work at city colleges, including myself, had a similar experience. And that's how you really got in the door. Because it isn't enough to, having an associate's degree isn't going to get you in that door, because those companies are screening for bachelor's degrees, even if you're more capable and have the capacity to do it. So what we're doing is saying, well, our students have a portfolio of work that's hyper capable, that's hyper competitive, and if you don't hire them, your competitor will. And that's really changing the conversation, and we're really flipping the script. And also, we're doing it in partnership with these companies, so they're already bought into it. They're already part of the growth process. They're part of the education process, and they now have a more personal engagement with students, and they want to hire that person and have them be with them for a long time because revolving doors are expensive. And so that's something that we're learning clearly. So it's really definitely all of the basic things: accessibility, affordability, but it's really exposure, network, and a clear path to say, you're here in your life right now. If you go with us over the next 14 weeks and do these things and meet these people, this is where you could potentially be in the next year. And this is what upward economic mobility really looks like in the next 2 to 3 years for yourself. And that's the conversation that we're having in Chicago, and being a huge institution in the community college space. Also, we're like the second largest community college system in the state. I think it's really, mixing up the conversation that we're having in higher education in a positive way.
Yeah, I think the point on awareness and exposure is extremely important, because I think there was actually a study by Project Wise that said they actually surveyed millennials going into technology fields, and they asked them, what field do you want to go into? And only 9% chose cybersecurity, which is interesting because of all the tech fields, cybersecurity has, again, the most job openings, but also is probably the highest paying in those fields. But it's like, I think it might be because in traditional academia, you're often not presented with coursework on cybersecurity. It's not something that's part of the curriculum. I think you both have done innovative things in your institutions, but in general, it's not being done. Would you agree with that? How can we solve that?
It's changing, right? So we at NYU had started a program almost 20 years ago. Nobody was doing it at that time, right? It's changing today with the NSA and the Department of Homeland Security starting the National Centers of Excellence in Cybersecurity education. And there are more than 100, 150 schools now. Now, what are they teaching and et cetera, I don't know, but there's more and more schools who are offering cybersecurity programs. In the last 10 years, I've seen that change quite rapidly. But what I hear from industry is that, they're not ready for our jobs, right? So we are probably still not doing the right things yet.
And it might be because it's more the deep theoretical information and less practical. Right?
Yeah. So when I started 20 years back, it was like security, that's about cryptography, right? Most security courses had mostly cryptography in it. And security is much more than that, right? So that mindset is only slowly creeping in. Sort of people are becoming aware of it. But I would say that, like an engineer, right, we teach people how to build reliable systems, and we know how to build reliable systems, right? If you look at the air transportation system, right, it's amazing what we can do. Right now, there's some plane going on a runway, achieves phenomenal speeds, achieves phenomenal heights, reaches the other end, a destination with no incident. Right? The chances of you having a problem, airplane accident, is actually smaller than you slipping in your bathroom and breaking your neck, right? That's how safe they are. And in engineering, every engineer learns about reliability, right? But we don't teach them security, right? And security is also now an essential part of, and it's very hard to teach also, right? Because jokingly we say that when you're designing for reliability, you're protecting against God, right? Accidents that may happen, nature. But when you're building for security, you're protecting against the devil, right? Because the bad guy will figure out where your weakness is and poke a hole. And so in academia, we don't know how to teach that very well, right? And again, so big conversation. And we still don't know how to teach that very well, and we're learning our way through it, I think.
Yep. But it is changing. I mean, you hear conversation after conversation here and other conferences about how, the traditional model needs fixing, and it needs to be better aligned to the skills that are happening in companies or needed in companies.
And you can't learn security by reading a textbook.
Right.
And writing an exam and getting a sort of some credential for that exam. You can't do that. You have to actually do something. Right. Practical you have to do as well.
Absolutely. Right. So Jorge, you're taking a very different approach in Puerto Rico. You're So you're actually looking at, underrepresented groups. You're looking at just people who may have never thought to even get into tech and giving them opportunities. Do you have to have deep technical knowledge and, degree after degree in cybersecurity, for example, to work in these fields, or what do you think?
The approach that we're taking is that perhaps we have people that want to switch careers and upskill, and we don't see it as being too difficult or needing to get too basic, because most of the basic knowledge they could have at hand. But the approach for people that have not come into the experience is that we make these credentials or stackable credentials where they can go without prior knowledge and enter into the field, get certificated, and probably get an internship and eventually work placement. And if they are interested to continue, what we want to do is have the certifications already available for them, so that when they choose the pathway and start experiencing the industry, they might naturally flow into higher level skills. And we're betting on this as the workforce of the future, because we have encountered several problems on the island of Puerto Rico. First, in 2017, we had the hurricanes, 2019 and 2020 earthquakes, and in 2020, a pandemic. So not only has the nature of work has changed, but it has also brought in another type of necessary workforce that needs to move on. And we're not seeing it from universities. We have the situation. I always say that when students come out of universities, they know how to do Java 3, but perhaps what the employers need is Java 28. And a way to close that gap is also to bring in these certifications to give a higher level of training and expertise and opportunities to learn and work for people that typically will not receive these opportunities.
Yeah, you're right. So actually, Wiley did a study in fall of 2020 where they talked to 600 HR professionals and asked them to talk about the skills and where the gap is. And 4 of the 5 top skills on the hard skills were all tech-related. And these are people who actually may have had computer science degrees or, technology degrees, but they just didn't have the skills in cloud computing, for example, networking, the areas where we have the biggest need as companies.
A recent survey in Puerto Rico showed that 58% of tech employers are not getting the workforce that they need, the employees that they need. And when you assess what's the problem, it's just that there is a gap on the skill set that students are bringing from traditional college or traditional pathways to education, and what they are actually in dire need of. So yes, it's aligned with the nationwide situation.
Something that we're learning at the community college level is, we know that there's a gap there, and part of what we're thinking through is how do we work with this modern workforce and this modern talent and connect them in a way that's relevant to both. And part of it is we've been building these interesting apprenticeship programs. So students are able to come to us, get up to an associate degree, also tack on certifications that are relevant to the industry they're in, and then connecting that to an employer in the beginning, middle, and end. So an employer is engaged from the beginning and saying, here, we maybe have a group of 25, 30 students. They're going to go over the next 6 months. Here's the stack of tech skills they'll have. By the end of it, they integrate in the middle. They give them a project that they work on for the next couple of months. By the end of that, they have a portfolio of work that's super relevant to the specific employer, and they're getting paid all throughout this time by the employer. And at the end, they have a contingent offer, and then they'll come on to work with them at the end as a full-time employee. So they're engaging with them. They're basically on the education journey with them, but we're, as an institution, we're giving them a degree, we're giving them relevant certifications, and we're also giving them that exposure to an employer to gain those practical skills. And that's something that we're saying, students are doing this in 6 months. They can also go through like a 2-year specific program. And so that is really time effective, cost effective, and they know what they're getting from beginning to end. It helps them with their pathway throughout. And we're really seeing that change because, changing 20, 30 students' lives each cohort, and you run that a couple of times with an employer, you're building trust with that employer also. And it also helps employers understand what they're looking for because they come to us and they're like, I have no idea what I'm really looking for. This is what our, description says, but in practice, it's not really what it looks like. So they get to work with like the technical people on that team and really learn what it's like to engage with students because I think a lot of employers think they know exactly what they're looking for and maybe they hire recruiters, but it's a very different game when you're in the mix and you're talking to students and you're really understanding how do I get them to have the skills that I actually need and how do I get them to love my company so much that they're going to take my offer and stay with me for a while.
Yeah, I'm biased, but I honestly think that this is the model that could really revolutionize, this whole situation and really fix the problem, especially if it's done at the local level, city by city, because you have academic institutions who have facilities, you have companies who are looking for talent, and then you have, nonprofits and others who are willing to partner and facilitate the whole thing. And if you could replicate that city, and that's one of the things that actually attracted us to city colleges initially.
The public-private partnership component of it is what you really have to leverage, especially in a city like Chicago. That is our strong suit, and so leveraging that to people's advantage, like the actual lives of students is, I think, the way to go and the way that we're going so far.
Yeah, and we've proven that companies are willing to sponsor students to go through these programs. So it's not even, it helps solve the whole equity, conversation as well because companies will sponsor students to go through these programs. They have the ability to kind of mold and, shape them into what they need. And when they're ready, they basically have employability as an outcome. And
right. And for employers, it's also cost effective to do it that way.
Absolutely.
It costs them even less sometimes to kind of approach it this way. And there's also a lot of incentives to do it this way.
Yep. Yeah. So I just want to now jump more into the equity conversation. There are a number of different, in tech specifically, there are just a lot of disparities, right? So an interesting article I read in Wired a while back was that, in the 1950s, oddly enough, 90% of computer programmers and or programmers and systems analysts were women, 90%. And now it's actually flipped. So it's like 86% of cybersecurity employees are men, and it's really, really hard to get women into this field. And that's just looking at gender, but if you look at other underrepresented groups, underprivileged groups, and so forth, we have this huge, huge gap. How can we solve this? How can we fix this?
So I've worked on this problem for some time, right? Quite some time. So when I started, it was okay, I have special boot camps for high school women, teaching them cybersecurity, teaching women after-school clubs in high schools, like starting at that level. And some of the things I learned that matter seem to be that women need role models, right? And that's what gives them that confidence that I can do it as well. And that was lacking. It's now growing. You see a lot of women CISOs and women leaders in cybersecurity. In fact, we run a conference called Women Leaders in Cybersecurity, right? So that putting role models in front of them, saying that, look, and early stage at high school stage, right? And the second thing is that there is this misconception that cybersecurity is about hacking, it's about breaking things, and it's about and women don't like that, right? They like to build, they like to collaborate, right? Maybe I'm stereotyping, I don't know. There's some scientific literature, at least. And they don't like to sit in a basement all alone, hacking away, so-called. But cybersecurity is not that way at all, as you know, right? And that misconception that you get from the movies and all the other signals they get, that cybersecurity is not for women, right? That it involves all these it doesn't attract them to that. So kind of, we address that to whatever extent we can into the limited audience we face. But at the national level, right, that messaging is not there. And
I think that it's important for school systems, educators in general, to understand the phases of development. And in the case of females, they already have set out whether or not they will complete a college degree by fourth grade. So they're figuring out that perhaps that's an aspiration that they want to follow. And once that aspiration has been set, they follow through until they either reach it. So I think that we should start early. And kids cannot be what they cannot see. Mm-hmm. So we have to make also the life job of the IT person as visible as possible and as accessible as however we can make it. I do not have a precise plan for that, but there is still the necessity to get them engaged early on. And the second thing that I would offer is, or that I can point out in terms of equity, is that we also tend to look at the high achievers in schools, and that's not necessarily the people that are going to end up being the workforce that we need in areas of IT. And in that case, my invitation, to put it in some kind of manner that's politically correct, is to move away a little bit from the high achievers, and let's look at the regular students that we have, and let's make IT accessible for them. Let's get them engaged and included in activities that schools or universities wouldn't naturally or typically consider them, and bring them into the table, bring them into the experiences, and let them engage. And I think that that's a key aspect to switch the inclusion challenge that we're having.
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit on that. I think definitely early exposure is key. I think projects that get them some experience and get them to expose themselves to what it really means to be in cybersecurity or any of these tech roles is key early on. And I think the other piece is also how we're socializing these roles and talking about the importance of them. You know, these are really important roles for companies, for people's lives, for our country, and putting an emphasis on that, I think, is really important. And I think saying, you know, the next generation is always the generation that's going to lead us forward, and kind of talking about it that way is important because they're important. And I think, you know, women, people of color, like young black men in the space, young Latinx men in the space, like those are really, I think, individuals that have a lot of natural skills that will go into a lot of these roles, including cybersecurity. And it's early exposure, it's early projects that are interesting, but it's also socializing. Like, you guys are the next real leaders of industries that really matter, industries that are going to save the world. And we were just through this catastrophic event, and we're going to continue to go through them. And you know, the world's going to continue to get hot, and people are going to continue to hack us, and these are real problems, and you're a problem solver, so how do you get engaged and do it in a way that is true to you? And it doesn't necessarily have to be at a big corporation, or it can be. It could be at a startup that you build, or it could be a startup that you join. There's a lot of different ways to get engaged, and I think opening up that world of possibility and kind of having this new wave of inspiration is really key, because you have to be able to inspire talent to kind of come back into it the way that we have to inspire, you know, academics to come back into academia and teach, you know, and I think a lot of it is just inspiration and relevancy and hyper relevancy now.
And I think it's also just showing that these careers are accessible, right? So going back, like, you don't have to be this tremendous coder to work in cybersecurity. You could actually transition from working in retail or from being a barista or anything actually into one of these fields with the right credential, with the right training, potentially some soft skills training and other things, right? That seems to be a big misconception, which makes it seem like it's something only for those kids that go to MIT, but it really isn't.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we say that cybersecurity is not just a technology problem, it's actually a business problem, it's a legal problem, it's a human behavior problem, and people with all kinds of knowledge skills are needed. It's not just coders, yeah. that message also doesn't go across, because what they see in Hollywood and TV shows is hackers, right?
I think part of that too is employers also have to, take a really good look at themselves and say, are we employed in a way that's equitable? Are we attracting talent that we haven't looked at before? Are we changing our recruiting habits? Because for us, especially, we got to get through the associate degree hurdle, associate versus bachelor degree hurdle. The way that we're doing that is giving students all of the resources and skill set that they need to say, hey, I'm actually more competitive than my counterpart because I have these certifications, I have this network, I have this experience, I've done this work. And employers have to, I think, walk the walk. I think there's a lot of talk the talk, and now it's, can you actually employ them? Will you invest in this talent? Will you change how you're hiring? And look at skills that you're actually looking for, and that's actually more cost effective for you. It's more beneficial to you long term, and it makes them, and it's also the right thing to do.
And we've been talking a lot about cybersecurity, but this is actually prevalent in all IT fields, right? So privacy, data science, all these other areas, there's just tremendous opportunity. I know cybersecurity seems to be on top of mind just because of all the ransom attacks and just it's always in the news, but there are tech fields all over that are looking for workers. Anything else? Okay. I guess Jorge, can you talk a little bit about credentials and just why you see them to be valuable? And I guess for all of you, I mean, there are all these companies now that are coming out and saying we don't need degrees anymore, that you can just simply get a credential or you can go through some training and we'll hire you, Google being one of them. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that just degrees, credentials, they're all tokens of passage for different industries where you're going. There is a value for the academic degree, and there is a market for that. It might be saturated, but it's there. But tokens such as these IT credentials or as advanced as you might find them are tokens that open doors at other levels. And that's what we're seeing. Typically, you would see students that think that perhaps, and it's a misconception in the way that they have been brought up, or that they have been giving information about the world. But typically you see them that they come with a bachelor's degree and they think that doors will open automatically. So in a highly competitive world, what has the advantage is the token that opens the door for further advancement. And that's how we are seeing these credentials. We don't see them necessarily as a substitute for academic degrees. They're just another type of preparation that an individual might bring, that he may not have a bachelor's degree, but still, if he has proven to be competent in an area, I might want to consider that individual as an employee because he brings with him an expertise or a trajectory that is beneficial for me as an employer. And that's how we see it. It's a token of passage.
Any thoughts?
Well, I totally agree with that. Obviously, at a community college, that's, a huge point for us and it's also how we, as we work with students and they're kind of thinking through what is the right path for me, it is thinking about, well, for us, our goal is to get them from us to employment. And that's super key, and we're hyper-focused on that. And part of that is going through this rite of passage and getting these credentials. And having those credentials verified by industry and having partners like ISACA that helps us do that is really, really key, because there's so many players in the space and all of them are hiring, and we have to, in order to understand what are the basic things students need to have, what are the high-level things students need to have is really important, and then we can teach that to students and walk them through a journey of if you're here in your life, here are some options, and giving students options that include these passages of credentials is really key. And for many and most, it's the first time that someone's walking through these hypothetical scenarios for their career and putting dollar figures on them too. Here's what we're seeing data saying, if you have these credentials and you go to this company, we know this is what they're paying for this type of role. And that's really important, because then you're putting real value on their time and their investment and inspiring them to get interested and do those roles.
So one thing that was surprising to me, I worked in, as Cengage for 16 years in the publishing industry and just in traditional ed tech, but when I came into the association world, just all these associations that exist that have these certifications, and the certification is, the badge of honor. It's the thing that people are seeking, but then the byproduct that actually is even more valuable is the network and the community that you become part of holding these certifications. And typically, these are the people that are hiring, for people in your field. Mm-hmm. So that's the other piece I think that's missing, like with these credentials, whether it's partnership with universities or just getting the credential on your own, but getting access to that network of like individuals who are working in the field you're trying to work in mm-hmm. Is extremely valuable.
Right. And academia is not very good at providing that. I mean, I have my network, right, from my high school, undergrad, but that takes a long time to develop and mature, right? It doesn't help me in my current aspiration, my current job move that I want to do, and academia typically is not good at providing that. Yeah, but coming back to credentials a little bit, if you don't mind, you can think about the degree credential and training credentials, right? I think of maybe I'm old-fashioned and old, I think of the degree credential as the foundation, right, that you need. And then the training credentials as the rooms that you build, right? So if you're thinking about, for a job, you need the training credential. For a career, I think you need the degree credential. So we begin with the foundation, the degree credential, then we get the training. That's been the model. Now, will this model change where you're building the foundation and the room simultaneously as you're building the palace of your career? I don't know. Maybe that's where the world is going, and maybe you have to figure out how to do it. Because the foundation right in the beginning is too bulky. It takes a lot of time and effort to build that foundation, but it's a solid foundation. It serves you for life. Right? On top of it, you can build other credentials. Yeah. Yeah.
I completely agree.
I just have one comment to that, and I know we're short on time, but I think that it's really important, the quality of that credential. And I think that's a whole other conversation. Sure. How do we make sure that the quality of these credentials is actually up to par with the real world, and it's actually going to be service me in a good way when I begin my job search after finishing. And that's what I think associations bring into the table also, making sure that there's high quality, right, that there's rigor in the determination of the fitness of that candidate or student or participant, and how long and how far that can get them.
And the associations can keep it current, right? ISACA and your members know what's going on in the world right now. In academia, we are more in research and long-term, slowly moving knowledge, so our touch with that is less. Yeah. Right.
That's a good point. There's a plethora of certificates and just they keep popping up and everything, but certification, if it's done right, it has to go through an accreditation. Right. It is a very long and arduous process, and so that's a very good distinction to point out. Any final thoughts? Hope for the future? Things looking bright?
I think things are always looking bright. So, and there's only a way forward. And I think having the right partners at the table now is more important than ever. And I think inspiring talent is important now more than ever. So I think with that, definitely agree having an association at the table is helpful, because that's a lot of work on the institution's end, and it's not a lot of the work that we do well. So having partners that do it well, are on time, like that is really helpful for us.
So I think we are moving in a good direction. As I said, I've run a program, cybersecurity program, for 20 years. Graduated maybe 1,000 people, right? Small, exclusive, high cost. Three years back, we launched an affordable $18,000 master's, deep partnership in the industry, ISACA. We already have 1,000 students there, right? And we plan to grow to 2,000, 3,000. So much more than what we've had in the last 20 years. And I think we're learning how to do it. The other schools also will do that. Georgia Tech is doing something similar, right? And I'm sure other schools will follow. And I think we will, once we make programs affordable, accessible, and leverage digitization to bring scale, right? And work deeply, closely with industry and nonprofits like ISACA, right? I think we'll get the workforce moving in the right direction. Yeah.
I'm just saying that, stating that yes, we're in a good place right now in terms of what these calamities have shown us, particularly in Puerto Rico. I can only speak from that optics. So these disasters have taught us that we need to change the way we teach. They taught us that we need to change the way we work and the way that we depend on our labor force. So I think that this is a great opportunity to engage the future.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for taking the time, for joining us. Thank you all for listening to us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the conference and safe travel back home.